They say the most dangerous person in the room is the one who listens while everyone else talks. Dominic Cross thought his wife was nothing more than a pretty decoration, a silent accessory to his billion-dollar empire. He thought stripping her of her credit cards, her home, and her last name would break her. He was wrong. He didn't know that the woman he threw out in the rain wasn't just his wife. She was the secret architect behind his entire fortune. And he certainly didn't expect that the next time he saw her, the most powerful man on Wall Street, Harrison Sterling, would be the one holding the door open for her. This is the story of the ultimate regret. Buckle up. The sound of the pen scratching against the paper was louder than the thunder rattling the floor-to-ceiling windows of the penthouse. It was a violent, final sound. Sign it, Madeline. Stop dragging this out. It's embarrassing. Dominic Cross stood by the fireplace, swirling a glass of amber liquid that cost more than most people earned in a year. He didn't even look at her. He was looking at his reflection in the glass, admiring the cut of his Italian suit, the sharpness of his jawline, the sheer aura of a man who had conquered the Manhattan real estate market. Madeline sat at the heavy mahogany desk. She looked small in the oversized leather chair. Her hair, usually pinned up in the sleek chignon Dominic preferred, hung loose and slightly damp around her shoulders. She wore no makeup. She looked tired. The clause about the non-compete, Dominic, Madeline said softly, her voice raspy. You've barred me from working in design for 5 years? That's my entire career. Dominic laughed. It was a cold, barking sound. He turned, finally deigning to look at the woman he had been married to for 6 years. Your career? He sneered, walking over and placing his hands flat on the desk, leaning into her space. Maddie, arranging throw pillows and picking out curtains for our summer house is not a career. It's a hobby. I'm protecting my brand. I don't want you out there running some tacky Etsy shop and attaching the Cross name to it. You're signing away your rights to the company assets, and in exchange, you get the apartment in Queens and a year's allowance. It's generous. More than you deserve. Madeline looked down at the document. The apartment in Queens, the one her grandmother had left her, it was the only thing Dominic hadn't bought. Is she moving in tonight? Madeline asked, her eyes lifting to meet his. Dominic didn't flinch. Tiffany arrives at 8. I want you gone by 7. The movers have already packed your personal effects, the clothes I didn't buy you, which, frankly, isn't much. Tiffany Street James, the daughter of a senator, blonde, bubbly, and 23. She was everything Dominic wanted his brand to represent, new, shiny, and devoid of complications. Madeline was 32, quiet, and possessed a gaze that sometimes made Dominic feel like he was being X-rayed. He hated that feeling. You're making a mistake, Dom, Madeline said. She wasn't pleading. She was stating a fact, like one might mention it was raining. The only mistake I made was marrying a charity case, Dominic spat. I pulled you out of that Art Institute debt. I gave you a life of luxury. And what did you do? You sat in this house, silent, while I built an empire. You're finished, Madeline. Without me, you're just a ghost. Madeline picked up the pen. Her hand didn't shake. She signed her name Madeline Hart. She left the Crosses behind without a second glance. Done, she whispered. Good, now get out. Madeline stood up. She didn't take the check Dominic had left on the table. She walked to the elevator, her spine straight. As the doors slid open, she looked back at the man she had loved. The man whose business proposals she had secretly rewritten late at night while he slept. The man whose genius architectural concepts were actually sketches she had left on his desk. Goodbye, Dominic, she said. He had already turned his back to pour another drink. Don't forget to leave your keycard at the front desk. The elevator doors closed, sealing her out of the penthouse and out of the life of the billionaire Dominic Cross. Down in the lobby, the concierge, a kindly older man named Arthur, looked at her with sad eyes. Mrs. Cross. I mean, Miss Hart. The car is waiting. I don't need the town car, Arthur, Madeline said, pulling her coat tighter. I'll walk to the subway. But ma'am, it's pouring rain. I know, she said, a faint, mysterious smile touching her lips for the first time that day. I need the fresh air. She stepped out into the deluge of the New York night. She was soaked instantly. A black SUV idled at the curb, and for a second, she thought Dominic had shown a mercy she didn't expect. But the window rolled down to reveal Tiffany Street. James, looking dry and radiant. Oh, honey, Tiffany cooed, not sounding sorry at all. Did he kick you out already? That's so like Dom. Efficient. Madeline stopped. She looked at the young woman who thought she had won the lottery. Be careful with the West Wing renovation, Tiffany, Madeline said calmly. The load-bearing walls aren't where they look like they are on the blueprints. If you knock the wrong one down, the whole roof comes in. Tiffany rolled her eyes. I think I'll hire a real architect, thanks. Bye, antique. The SUV sped off, splashing muddy water onto Madeline's jeans. Madeline stood alone on the corner of Fifth Avenue. She reached into her pocket and pulled out an old, cracked smartphone, not the sleek iPhone Dominic provided, but a burner she had kept hidden in a shoebox. She dialed a number. It rang once. This is the Sterling Group. A crisp British voice answered. Mr. Sterling is in a meeting. Tell Harrison that the ghost is cashing in her favor, Madeline said. Her voice was no longer raspy. It was steel. There was a pause on the other end, followed by the sound of a chair scraping hurriedly against a floor. Miss Hart? Please hold. I'm patching you through to Mr. Sterling immediately. Madeline lowered the phone, looking up at the penthouse lights far above. Dominic thought she was finished. He thought she was just a wife. He had no idea that for the last 5 years, she had been the anonymous consultant known only as Veef, the strategist who had advised half the Fortune 500, including Dominic's biggest rivals. The rain washed away the tears. She refused to cry. The game had just begun. 3 months had passed since the divorce. In the high-stakes world of New York real estate, 3 months was an eternity. For Dominic Cross, it had been a quarter of record profits, or so it seemed on the surface. He was everywhere. Forbes covers, charity galas with Tiffany on his arm, interviews where he touted his singular vision for the future of urban living. But inside the glass walls of Cross Holdings, the air was getting thin. Why are the permits for the Hudson Yards project stalled? Dominic slammed his hand onto his desk, startling his VP of operations, a nervous man named Gary. We don't know, sir. Gary stammered. The City Planning Commission rejected the revised blueprints again. They said the structural integrity analysis was amateurish. Amateurish? Dominic roared. I designed that structure myself. Well, sir, usually the adjustments you make overnight are the ones that get approved, but you haven't made any adjustments lately. Dominic froze. He remembered those nights during his marriage. He would leave his rough sketches on the desk, frustrated and drunk. In the morning, he would find them tittied up, lines straightened, calculations corrected in neat pencil margins. He always assumed his subconscious had done it, or perhaps he had done it in a blackout state of genius. He had never once considered that Madeline, with her degree in art history and her obsession with mathematics, had touched them. Fix it, Gary. Just pay someone off. Dominic dismissed him. Waving his hand, he turned to the window. He pushed the thought of Madeline away. She was probably working as a waitress in Queens by now. Meanwhile, in a nondescript brick building in the meatpacking district, the atmosphere was very different. This was the headquarters of Sterling & Co., the most exclusive private equity firm on the East Coast. They were known as the Kingmakers. If Harrison Sterling backed you, you became a billionaire. If he bet against you, you were liquidated within the week. Harrison Sterling sat at the head of a glass table. He was 42, with silvering temples and eyes that looked like shattered ice. He was a man who rarely smiled, and he was currently looking at the woman sitting to his right. Madeline Hart looked nothing like the woman who had walked out of the penthouse 3 months ago. The frizzy, damp hair was now a sharp, asymmetrical bob that framed her face. She wore a tailored cream suit that cost more than Dominic's car. The projection for Cross Holdings suggests a liquidity crisis by Q3, Madeline said, sliding a dossier across the table. Her voice was calm, authoritative. You're certain? Harrison asked, picking up the file. I know how he leverages his debt, Madeline replied. He borrows against future projects to fund current ones. It works as long as the projects get approved instantly, but without the... She paused, a small, ironic smile playing on her lips. Without the cleanup on his blueprints, his approval rate has dropped by 40%. He's burning cash to maintain appearances for his new fiancée. Harrison closed the folder. He looked at Madeline with a mixture of respect and something warmer, something he kept carefully hidden. You really were the brain behind the curtain, weren't you, Maddie? I was the wife, she corrected him. In his eyes, that meant I was furniture. I just happened to be furniture that knew how to balance a spreadsheet and calculate load-bearing limits. So, what is the play? Harrison asked. The Obsidian Gala, Madeline said. Next Saturday. Dominic is going to be there to court investors for the Hudson project. He needs $500 million to stay afloat. And you want to block him? No, Madeline stood up. I don't want to block him. I want to buy him. But first, I want him to know exactly who he threw away. Harrison stood up as well. He towered over her, but he never made her feel small. The Obsidian Gala is invite only. The most exclusive ticket in the city. I know, Madeline said. That's why I need you to be my +1. Harrison laughed, a rare, genuine sound that made his assistants outside the glass walls look up in shock. Madeline, usually women ask me to buy them diamonds. You're asking me to help you execute a hostile takeover of your ex-husband's ego. Is that a yes? Pick you up at 7, Harrison said. And Maddie? She paused at the door. Yes? Wear something red. It's the color of war. The Obsidian Gala was not merely a party, it was a barometer for the city's power structure. Held annually at the Pierre Hotel on Fifth Avenue, it was the night when alliances were forged in the smoking rooms and enemies were destroyed over caviar. For Dominic Cross, tonight was survival. He adjusted his silk bow tie in the reflection of the limousine window. His hands were steady, but his heart was hammering a frantic rhythm against his ribs. The liquidity crisis was worse than he had admitted to anyone, even himself. The banks had frozen his credit lines 3 days ago. If he didn't secure a private investor tonight specifically, the elusive billionaire tycoon Arthur Pendleton, who was rumored to be attending the Cross Empire, would be insolvent by Monday morning. Do I look okay, Dom? I feel like this diamond is too small. Maybe I should have worn the emeralds. Tiffany Street James sat beside him, scrolling through Instagram on her phone. She was wearing a dress that left very little to the imagination. A shimmering silver thing that looked more appropriate for a Las Vegas club than the Obsidian Gala. Dominic looked at her, and for a fleeting second, a memory superimposed itself over reality. He remembered the first gala he had taken Madeline to. She had worn a vintage black velvet gown, modest but striking. She had spent the entire night speaking fluent French to the delegation from Zurich, securing him the funding for his first skyscraper. She hadn't complained about diamonds. She had talked about interest rates and zoning laws. You look fine, Tiffany, Dominic snapped, looking away. Just try not to talk too much tonight. Pendleton is old money. He hates chatter. Ugh, you're so grumpy lately, Tiffany pouted. You promised this would be fun. All you do is look at spreadsheets. The limo pulled up to the curb. The paparazzi flashbulbs erupted like a lightning storm. Dominic put on his mask, the smile of the golden boy, the untouchable developer. As they walked the red carpet, Dominic scanned the crowd. He saw the sharks of Wall Street, the heiresses, the tech moguls. But he felt a strange chill. The atmosphere was different tonight. There was a buzz, a whisper rippling through the line of guests. Did you hear? A woman in front of them whispered to her husband. Harrison Sterling is coming. And they say he's bringing a guest. Dominic stiffened. Harrison Sterling. The man was a myth. He hadn't attended a public gala in 5 years. Sterling ran the kind of money that made Dominic's wealth look like pocket change. If Sterling was here, something big was happening. Inside the ballroom, the air was thick with the scent of lilies and expensive perfume. Dominic made a beeline for the bar, needing a scotch to settle his nerves. He left Tiffany taking selfies near the ice sculpture. Rough quarter cross? Dominic turned to see Marcus Thorne, a rival developer whom he had outbid for the Brooklyn waterfront project 2 years ago. Thorne looked smug. Record profits, actually. Dominic lied smoothly, just expanding too fast to keep track of it all. Jealous? Thorne chuckled, taking a sip of his martini. I hear the City Planning Commission is eating you alive on the Hudson project. Strange. You used to breeze through those approvals. It's almost like you lost your lucky charm. Dominic's grip tightened on his glass. I don't need luck. I have vision. Vision is great, Thorne said, leaning in. But math is better. By the way, have you met the new consultant everyone is talking about? Goes by V. She's the one who advised the commission to double-check your structural loads. She dismantled your blueprints in 10 minutes. Dominic felt the blood drain from his face. Who is she? No one knows. She's a ghost. Works exclusively through the Sterling Group. Thorne patted Dominic on the shoulder. Good luck tonight, Dom. I think you're going to need it. Dominic watched Thorne walk away. His hands were shaking now. A ghost. The word echoed in his mind. He remembered what he had told Madeline the night he kicked her out. "Without me, you're just a ghost." He shook his head. Impossible. Madeline was likely working retail or living off the meager settlement. She didn't have the connections to get to Harrison Sterling. He found Tiffany again. She was talking to Arthur Pendleton, the very investor Dominic needed to impress. Dominic rushed over, his heart in his throat, praying she hadn't said anything stupid. "So I told him." Tiffany was giggling, twirling a lock of hair. "Why build affordable housing when you can just build more penthouses? Poor people can just move to New Jersey, right?" Arthur Pendleton, a man who had built his fortune on ethical urban development, looked at Tiffany as if she were a cockroach in his soup. "Dominic," Pendleton said coldly as Dominic approached, "your fiancée has some unique views on urban planning." "She's joking, Arthur," Dominic said quickly, grabbing Tiffany's arm a little too hard. "She has a dry sense of humor. Listen, about the Hudson proposal." "I'm not interested, Cross," Pendleton cut him off. "I'm putting my capital into the new sustainable initiative being launched tonight, the one backed by Harrison Sterling." "Sterling is launching an initiative?" Dominic asked, bewildered. "Yes. A massive redevelopment grant. And rumor has it, the project lead is the sharpest mind New York has seen in a decade." Pendleton checked his watch. "He should be arriving any minute." "Excuse me." Pendleton walked away, leaving Dominic standing in the wreckage of his potential deal. "What a rude old man," Tiffany scoffed. "Shut up," Dominic hissed. It was the first time he had truly raised his voice at her. "Just shut up, Tiffany. You just cost me $50 million. Tiffany's eyes welled with tears, but Dominic ignored her. The room had gone suddenly, strangely quiet. The jazz band had stopped playing. The murmur of conversation died down to a hush. The heavy oak doors at the top of the grand staircase swung open. The doorman stepped aside. "He's here," someone whispered near Dominic. Dominic looked up. He expected to see Harrison Sterling. He expected to see the titan of industry. But he wasn't prepared for what came next. He wasn't prepared for the moment that would rewrite his entire life. 10 minutes earlier, outside the hotel, the rain had stopped, leaving the New York streets glistening under the streetlights. A procession of limousines and town cars had deposited the city's elite. But the arrival of the vehicle at the end of the line caused the valet captain to straighten his tie and wave the other attendants back. It was a Rolls-Royce Phantom, painted a deep, midnight blue. It moved with a silent, predatory grace, gliding to a halt exactly in the center of the red carpet. The press, who had begun to pack up their gear, suddenly scrambled back into position. They knew that car. They knew the crest on the license plate. "Sterling," a photographer shouted. "It's Harrison Sterling." The flashbulbs began to pop even before the door opened, creating a strobe light effect that illuminated the wet pavement. The driver's door opened, and a uniformed chauffeur stepped out. He walked around the back of the car with practiced rhythm. But before he could reach the rear passenger handle, the rear door pushed open from the inside. Harrison Sterling stepped out. He was wearing a tuxedo that fit him like armor, black tie perfection. He stood 6'2", imposing and calm amidst the chaos of the screaming paparazzi. He buttoned his jacket, scanned the crowd with those piercing, icy eyes, and then did something that made the crowd gasp. He didn't walk toward the hotel. He turned back to the car. Usually, the billionaire walks in first. Usually, the date trails behind, but Harrison Sterling turned, extended a hand, and waited. He wasn't just being polite. He was presenting something. "Ready?" he said into the darkness of the car's interior. "Ready," a voice replied. Harrison opened the door wider. First came the shoe, a stiletto heel, blood red, piercing the red carpet like a dagger. Then the leg, toned and elegant. And then Madeline Hart stepped out of the shadows and into the blinding light of the flashbulbs. She was unrecognizable from the woman who had left Dominic's penthouse in a raincoat 3 months prior. She wore a gown of crimson silk that seemed to flow like liquid fire. It was backless, daring, yet regal. It hugged her frame, revealing a confidence that hadn't been there before, or perhaps a confidence that had been suppressed. Her hair was a sharp, glossy bob that accentuated the long line of her neck. Her makeup was fierce, a dark, bold lip and eyes that could cut glass. But it wasn't the dress. It was the way she stood. She didn't shrink from the cameras. She owned them. Harrison offered his arm. Madeline took it, her fingers resting lightly on his sleeve. She looked up at him, and for a moment, the world fell away. They looked like a power couple that had been ruling the world for centuries. "Who is that?" a reporter screamed. "Who is she? Is that the cross woman?" another shouted, sounding unsure. "No, it can't be. She looks dangerous." Madeline turned her head toward the cameras. She didn't smile. She gave a look of cool, detached amusement. They began to walk up the grand stairs toward the ballroom. Inside, Dominic was still fuming at Tiffany near the entrance when the hush fell over the room. He turned toward the grand staircase just as Harrison Sterling appeared at the top. Dominic felt a pang of jealousy. Sterling commanded the room without saying a word. "And here we go," Harrison said quietly to Madeline. They began to descend the stairs. Every eye in the room was fixed on them. Dominic squinted. He saw Sterling, yes. But who was the woman in red? She was stunning. She carried herself with an air of absolute authority. She looked familiar, in the way a dream feels familiar. As they got closer, the woman's gaze swept across the room. She bypassed the actors, the politicians, the models. Her eyes locked onto Dominic. Dominic's glass slipped from his fingers. It hit the marble floor and shattered. Champagne soaked his shoes. He didn't notice. He couldn't breathe. The structure of her face, the way she held her chin, the intelligence in those eyes. "Madeline?" he whispered. The name felt like sand in his mouth. Tiffany looked up from her phone. "What did you say? Who is that?" Madeline and Harrison reached the bottom of the stairs. The crowd parted for them like the Red Sea. They walked straight toward Dominic. It wasn't a confrontation. It was a drive-by. Dominic stepped forward, his brain unable to process the data. "Madeline? What are you? What are you doing here?" He sounded weak, pathetic. Harrison Sterling stopped. He looked at Dominic with the expression one might use when stepping in something unpleasant on the sidewalk. "Good evening, Cross," Harrison said, his voice deep and smooth. "Sterling?" Dominic stammered, then looked back at his ex-wife. "Maddie, that dress is you look expensive?" Madeline finished the sentence for him. Her voice was cool, crisp, devoid of the raspiness he remembered from their final fight. It's amazing what one can afford when they aren't supporting a deadweight ego. The people standing nearby gasped. A circle was forming. This was the drama everyone craved. You came with him?" Dominic pointed at Harrison, his hand shaking. "You're sleeping with Harrison Sterling?" Madeline laughed. It was a dark, rich sound. "Oh, Dominic, you always did think small. I'm not sleeping with him." She took a step closer to Dominic, invading his personal space just as he had done to her in his office. She smelled of jasmine and power. "I'm his partner," she said, her voice loud enough for the investors nearby, including Arthur Pendleton, to hear. "I'm the new Chief Strategy Officer for the Sterling Group. And the ghost who just flagged your Hudson Yards project for 6 severe safety violations? That was me." Dominic felt the room spin. You blocked my project?" "I saved the city from a collapsing building," she corrected. "And I saved your investors from a lawsuit. You should be thanking me." "But don't worry, Dominic. I'm not here to talk about your failures. I'm here to buy them." Harrison checked his watch. "Shall we, Madeline? Mr. Pendleton is waiting for us at the VIP table. I believe we have a sustainable housing initiative to fund." "We shall," Madeline said. She turned her back on Dominic. She didn't look at Tiffany, not even once. As she walked away, the red silk of her dress rippling behind her, Dominic realized the terrible truth. He hadn't just lost a wife. He had lost the engine. And now, the engine was running over him. "Wait," Dominic called out, desperation cracking his voice. "Madeline, wait. We need to talk." She didn't stop. She didn't look back. Harrison Sterling placed a protective hand on the small of her back as they disappeared into the VIP section, leaving Dominic standing in a puddle of champagne and broken glass, while the flashing lights of the room seemed to mock him. Monday morning arrived like a funeral procession. The headline of the New York Financial Journal lay on Dominic Cross's desk, bold and unforgiving. "Cross Holdings in crisis. Investors flee after red dresses revelation." Dominic sat in his office, the blinds drawn against the harsh morning sun. He hadn't slept. The image of Madeline in that red dress, standing beside Harrison Sterling, was burned into his retinas. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw her. Not the quiet wife who made him tea, but the titan who had publicly humiliated him. "Sir?" Gary, his VP of operations, stood in the doorway. He looked like he was about to vomit. "What is it, Gary?" Dominic asked, rubbing his temples. "If it's about the Hudson permits, I don't want to hear it." "It's not the permits, sir. It's the bank. First National has called in the loan." Dominic shot up from his chair. "They can't do that. We have a term sheet. The maturity date isn't for another 2 years. They cited a material adverse change clause," Gary whispered, stepping into the room and closing the door. Apparently, when Arthur Pendleton pulled his funding publicly at the gala, it triggered a risk assessment algorithm. "The bank views us as insolvent imminent. They want the full $300 million. By Friday." $300 million? Dominic laughed, a manic, high-pitched sound. "I don't have $300 million liquid, Gary. It's all tied up in the steel for the Brooklyn site. It's in the land." "There's more," Gary said, his voice trembling. "We received a cease and desist letter an hour ago." "From who?" "From a holding company called Vantage Design LLC. I've never heard of them." "You have, actually." Gary placed a legal document on the desk. "They claim ownership of the architectural copyrights for the Helix Tower and the Cross River Bridge designs. They claim that the intellectual property was never transferred to Cross Holdings and remains the sole property of the original creator." Dominic grabbed the paper. "I designed those. Me, I'm the creator." "Well, sir." Gary hesitated, taking a step back for safety. "According to the patent filings attached, the designs were registered 4 years ago under the name M. Hart. The filing dates precede the Cross Holdings copyright claim by 3 days. Legally, the creator is Madeline Hart, and she just sold the rights to Vantage Design." Dominic fell back into his chair. The room spun. He remembered those nights. He would sketch a rough idea on a napkin, a spiral shape, a bridge curve. He would pass out. Madeline would stay up all night, digitizing them, running the CAD simulations, fixing the physics, and apparently filing the paperwork. "She owns my buildings," Dominic whispered. "She owns the designs of my flagship towers. And Vantage Design," Gary added softly, "is a subsidiary of the Sterling Group." Dominic swept the items off his desk. His computer monitor crashed to the floor. His nameplate, Dominic Cross, CEO, clattered against the wall. "Get out," he screamed. "Get out." Gary fled. Dominic stood alone in the wreckage of his office. His phone buzzed. It was Tiffany. "Babe, my card got declined at Prada. This is so embarrassing. Fix it as soon as possible. Love you." Dominic stared at the message. The rage that had been building inside him for months, the stress of the debt, the humiliation of the gala, it all focused into a singular, burning point. He typed a reply. "The card is canceled. The engagement is off. Move out by noon." He threw the phone across the room. It shattered against the window. He needed a drink. But more than that, he needed to stop the bleeding. He needed to talk to the one person who controlled the knife. By Wednesday, the stock price of Cross Holdings had plummeted 40%. The construction sites were silent. The workers had walked off the job when the payroll checks bounced. Madeline Hart sat in her new office at the Sterling Group. It was a stark contrast to the Cross penthouse. It was modern, minimalist, with glass walls overlooking the very skyline she had helped shape. Harrison Sterling sat opposite her, reading a report. "Cross is desperate," Harrison said, closing the folder. "He's selling off the Hamptons estate. He's liquidating his car collection. He's trying to raise cash to pay off the bank loan." "It won't be enough," Madeline said calmly, sipping her espresso. "The penalties on the loan recall alone will eat up the liquidity. He's going to file for Chapter 11 bankruptcy by Friday afternoon." "You calculated this perfectly," Harrison noted. There was no judgment in his voice, only professional admiration. The timing of the IP lawsuit froze his assets just as the bank called the loan. "He's paralyzed." "I lived with the man for 6 years, Harrison," Madeline said, looking out the window. "I know how he thinks. He always leverages to the max. He believes he's invincible. He thinks risk is something that happens to other people." "Do you feel bad?" Harrison asked. Madeline turned to him. Her eyes were clear. "I felt bad when he missed my mother's funeral because he had a golf meeting. I felt bad when he told me I was too unpolished to attend the board dinners. I felt bad when he replaced me with a child and threw me out in the rain. No, Harrison, I don't feel bad. This isn't revenge. This is a market correction. The intercom on her desk beeped. Miss Hart? The receptionist's voice came through. Mr. Dominic Cross is here. He says it's an emergency. He looks unwell. Madeline exchanged a look with Harrison. I can have security remove him, Harrison said, his hand moving to the phone. No, Madeline said. She stood up and smoothed her skirt. Let him in. It's time to close the deal. Dominic Cross looked like a man who had gone 12 rounds with a heavyweight boxer. His suit was wrinkled. He hadn't shaved in 3 days. The arrogance that usually radiated from him like a force field was gone, replaced by a jittery, hollow-eyed desperation. He walked into Madeline's office and stopped. He looked at the sleek furniture, the view, and finally, at Harrison Sterling, who was leaning casually against the back wall, arms crossed. Can we talk? Dominic asked, his voice rasping. Alone? Harrison stays, Madeline said. She didn't offer Dominic a seat. She stood behind her desk, a fortress of glass and steel. Dominic swallowed hard. He looked at Harrison, then back at Madeline. He seemed to shrink. Maddie, he started, using the nickname he had banned her from using in public. You have to stop this. You're killing the company. There are families, employees, innocent people who rely on those jobs. Don't pretend you care about the employees, Dominic, Madeline said sharply. You cut their health care last year to buy a yacht. The employees will be fine. When the company is restructured, their contracts will be honored. Yours, however, will not. Dominic ran a hand through his messy hair. Restructured? You're talking about a takeover. I'm talking about a rescue, Madeline said. You've driven the car off the cliff. I'm just buying the wreckage for scrap metal. Dominic stepped forward, his hands out, palms up. Is this about Tiffany? Because she's gone. I kicked her out. I realized I made a mistake, a massive mistake. He tried to summon the charm that had won her over 7 years ago in that coffee shop. He tried to soften his eyes. I was a fool, Maddie. I got caught up in the fame, the money. I lost sight of who was really doing the work. It was always you. You were the genius. I see that now. He moved closer to the desk, his eyes pleading. Come back to me. Not just to the company. Come back home. We can fix this. We can build it back together. Just like the old days. You and me against the world. I'll make you a partner. 50 over 50. No, 60 over 40. Anything you want. Harrison shifted against the wall, a low growl rising in his throat, but Madeline held up a hand to stop him. She looked at Dominic. For a second, she remembered the man she had loved. She remembered the potential he had. But then she looked at the reality of him, a man who only valued her when she was useful, a man who only wanted her back because he was drowning. You don't want a wife, Dominic, Madeline said softly. You want a chief financial officer who sleeps in your bed. You want someone to fix your messes so you can play king. I love you, Dominic lied. The words felt heavy and false in the air. I never stopped. Madeline laughed. It was a dry, humorless sound. You didn't love me, Dominic. You loved that I made you look smart. You loved that I made you rich. And the moment you thought you could do it without me, you discarded me like a wrapper. She opened a drawer and pulled out a thick document. She slid it across the desk. What is this? Dominic asked, staring at the leather-bound folder. This is the acquisition agreement, Madeline said. Sterling Group buys Cross Holdings for pennies on the dollar. We absorb the debt, we take the assets, we take the IP. And what do I get? Dominic asked, his voice trembling. You get to walk away, Madeline said. You get to avoid bankruptcy court. You get to keep your personal bank account, what's left of it. And you get a non-compete clause. Dominic's head snapped up. A non-compete? 5 years, Madeline said, her eyes flashing with cold fire. You are barred from working in real estate development in New York, London, or Tokyo for 5 years. You cannot serve on any board. You cannot consult. You're ending my career, Dominic whispered. That's exactly what I did to you. No, Madeline corrected him. You tried to end my career because you were insecure. I am ending your career because you are incompetent. Dominic looked at the pen sitting on top of the document. It was a Mont Blanc, heavy and black. It looked just like the pen he had forced her to use to sign the divorce papers. The irony was suffocating. And if I don't sign? Dominic asked, his voice barely audible. Then the bank forecloses on Monday, Harrison spoke up for the first time. They seize everything. Your penthouse, your cars, your reputation. You'll be investigated for fraud regarding the structural safety reports you ignored. You'll likely face prison time for negligence. Dominic looked at Harrison. The billionaire looked bored, as if watching a bug struggle in a web. Dominic looked back at Madeline. She wasn't looking at him with hate, she was looking at him with pity. That hurt more than the anger. He picked up the pen. His hand shook violently. I built this, he whispered, a tear leaking out of his eye. I built this name. You built a facade, Dominic, Madeline said. Now sign it. And get out of my building. Dominic Cross signed his name. He signed away the empire he thought was his birthright. He signed away the legacy he had sacrificed his marriage for. He dropped the pen. He didn't look at them. He turned and walked toward the door. He looked smaller, older. The strut was gone. As he reached the door, Madeline spoke one last time. Dominic? He paused, his hand on the handle, a flicker of hope in his eyes. He turned back. Don't forget to leave your visitor's badge at the front desk, she said. The door clicked shut behind him. Madeline stared at the closed door for a long moment. The silence in the office was heavy. She let out a breath she felt like she had been holding for 3 months. Her shoulders dropped. Harrison walked over to the desk. He didn't touch her. He just stood close enough that she could feel his presence, a warm, steady anchor. It's done, he said quietly. It's done, Madeline repeated. She looked down at the signature. It was over. The ghost had won. But the story wasn't quite finished, because in the world of the elite, the end of one empire is just the fertilizer for the next. What now? Harrison asked. We own the company. We own the city. Madeline stood up. She walked to the window and looked out at the skyline, a jagged line of steel and glass, waiting for someone with vision. Now? She turned to Harrison, and for the first time in months, her smile reached her eyes. It was a genuine, brilliant smile. Now, we renovate? 1 year later, the New York skyline had changed. It was a subtle shift, but to those who knew the language of steel and glass, it was a revolution. Where the stalled, safety-hazard skeleton of the Hudson Yards project once stood, a new marvel now pierced the clouds. It was called the Vertex, a spiraling masterpiece of sustainable architecture that seemed to breathe with the city. It utilized a revolutionary living glass technology that regulated temperature and purified the air around it. It was the crown jewel of Sterling and Hart, the conglomerate that had risen from the ashes of Cross Holdings. In the lobby of the Vertex, the opening ceremony was in full swing. It made the Obsidian Gala look like a children's birthday party. The governor was there. The mayor was there. Even rivals who had once sneered at the chaotic collapse of Dominic Cross were now clamoring to shake the hand of the woman who had fixed it. Madeline Hart stood at the podium. She wasn't wearing red tonight. She wore white, a sharp, tailored tuxedo suit that signaled a clean slate. She looked out at the sea of faces, her gaze steady. We didn't just build a tower, Madeline said into the microphone, her voice amplified across the plaza. We rebuilt trust. We proved that integrity isn't a barrier to profit. It is the foundation of it. This building stands because we listened to the math, not the ego. Applause thundered. Flashbulbs popped. Far away, in a cramped one-bedroom apartment in Weehawken, New Jersey, a television flickered. Dominic Cross sat on a worn beige sofa, eating lukewarm takeout noodles. He was watching the broadcast of the opening ceremony. He looked different. The expensive haircut was gone, replaced by a generic trim. The tailored suits were sold. He wore a gray hoodie. He watched Madeline speak. He saw the way the light caught her eyes, eyes that used to look at him with adoration, eyes he had ignored while he stared at his phone. He worked now as a consultant for a mid-tier logistics firm in New Jersey. It was a fine job. It paid the rent. But it wasn't him. He wasn't a king anymore. He was just a guy named Dom, who used to be someone. His phone buzzed. It was a text from a number he didn't have saved, but he recognized the area code. It was Tiffany. Hey Dom. Long time no see. I saw you're working in Jersey now? I'm actually in the area next week. Maybe we could grab a drink? Miss you. Shasha. Dominic stared at the screen. He remembered the night of the gala. He remembered how quickly she had vanished when the credit cards stopped working. She had started dating a tech CEO from Silicon Valley a week after the breakup, but rumor had it that didn't last long either. Now, she was circling back, probably assuming he had hidden assets or was planning a comeback. Dominic laughed, a dry, rasping sound. He didn't reply. He deleted the thread, then he blocked the number. He looked back at the TV. Harrison Sterling had joined Madeline on stage. They weren't touching, but the connection between them was palpable. It was in the way they stood shoulder to shoulder, equals. Harrison handed Madeline a pair of oversized scissors to cut the ribbon. He whispered something to her, and she threw her head back and laughed a genuine, joyous laugh that Dominic hadn't heard in years. "Good for you, Maddie," Dominic whispered to the empty room. He turned off the TV. The screen went black, reflecting his own ghostly face. He picked up his noodles. Life went on, but the view was much worse from down here. Back at the Vertex, the after-party had moved to the penthouse lounge, the very top floor that Dominic had once dreamed of occupying. Harrison found Madeline on the terrace, looking out over the city lights. The wind whipped her hair, but she didn't seem to mind. She looked like the Queen of Manhattan. "You know," Harrison said, handing her a glass of vintage champagne, "the board is pushing for us to acquire the Miller properties in Chicago. They think we can replicate the turnaround we did here." Madeline took the glass, the bubbles catching the moonlight. "Chicago is tricky. The zoning laws are archaic. I know a strategist who is pretty good with zoning laws," Harrison teased, leaning against the railing. "She's expensive, though, very high maintenance. Demands total control." Madeline smiled, turning to face him. "She sounds like a nightmare." "She's a dream," Harrison corrected her, his voice dropping an octave. "She's the best investment I ever made." The air between them charged with electricity. For the past year, they had been partners. They had been warriors fighting side by side to save the company and build the new firm. They had shared late-night coffees, stressful board meetings, and the thrill of victory. But they had kept it professional, a careful dance of respect. "Harrison," Madeline said softly, "do you remember the night of the gala? When you opened the car door? I remember every second of it." "You didn't just open a door," she said, stepping closer. "You opened a future. You saw me when I was invisible." "You were never invisible, Madeline," Harrison said, reaching out to tuck a strand of hair behind her ear. His fingers lingered on her jawline. "You were just standing in the shadow of a man who wasn't tall enough to block the sun. I just helped you step aside." Madeline looked up at him. The man who had given her the platform, not because he wanted to own her, but because he wanted to unleash her. "I don't want to talk about zoning laws tonight," Madeline whispered. "Good," Harrison said. "Because I just resigned from the Chicago Negotiation Committee." "Why?" "Because I have a date." "Oh? With who?" "With the CEO of Sterling and Hart. I hear she's formidable." Harrison leaned in, and finally, after a year of waiting, he kissed her. It wasn't the desperate, possessive kiss of a man like Dominic. It was steady, passionate, and secure. It was a merger of equals. Below them, the city honked and buzzed, a million stories happening at once. But up here, above the noise, Madeline Hart had finally found her view. She had lost the title of wife. She had lost the penthouse. She had lost the illusion of a perfect life. But she had gained herself. And as Harrison pulled away, smiling that rare smile that reached his icy eyes, Madeline realized something. The divorce wasn't the end of her story. It was just the opening credit. She took Harrison's hand. "Let's go," she said. "Where to?" "Forward." They turned and walked back into the light of the party, together. The door was wide open, and that is how the ghost of Wall Street stepped out of the shadows and built her own throne. Dominic Cross learned the hard way that a woman's silence isn't weakness, it's just the calm before the hurricane. He thought he could replace the architect of his life with a pretty face, only to realize that without the foundation, the whole house comes down. Madeline didn't just get revenge, she got something better. She got success, she got respect, and she got a partner who knows that a real power couple isn't about one person leading and the other following. It's about walking through the door together. Sometimes, the best revenge isn't screaming. It's living so well that the person who hurt you becomes nothing more than a footnote in your biography. Dominic is watching from a couch in Jersey. Madeline is watching from the top of the world. Never let anyone convince you that you are just a supporting character in their movie. You are the director of your own life. Cut the toxic people out, and watch how fast your script improves. Wow, what a journey. If Madeline's story fired you up, hit that like button right now. Let's get this video to 5,000 likes for the ghost who won. Have you ever been underestimated by a partner or a boss? Let me know in the comments below. I read every single story, and the best one might be featured in our next video. And if you want more stories of incredible karma, betrayal, and sweet revenge, make sure you subscribe and ring that notification bell so you never miss a twist. Thanks for watching, and remember, the best view comes after the hardest climb. See you in the next story.